On today's episode of the OCR Report podcast, the first episode of the first season of the first ever podcast to focus exclusively on the elite sport side of obstacle course racing. This is the OCR Report. Welcome back to the OCR Report. I say welcome back, I should say welcome to the OCR Report. This is episode 1, season 1. Very excited to bring you the OCR Report. Why another OCR podcast? I'm glad you asked. The future of obstacle course racing is in the elite sport side of OCR. When a guy at a bar wants to watch a sport, or when your uncle wants to sit on the couch and watch obstacle course racing, he doesn't want to watch teamwork and camaraderie. He wants to watch Ryan Atkins versus Jon Albon, or he wants to watch Trevor Psychos versus Chris Mendoza. He doesn't want to see, that guy doesn't care. The regular guy who's watching sport on television does not care about people helping each other over the wall. It's fine for 5 minutes, but they're not going to sit and watch for an hour, watch for 2 hours, watch for 3 hours. The future of the sport is in the elite sports side of the race. There will always be people like you and me, regular Joes out there challenging ourselves, having fun. But the big sponsorship comes from television, and television likes the competition. So we are very excited to bring you the OCR Report podcast. My name is Will Hicks. I will be your host. You may know me from my other podcasts, World's Toughest Podcasts, World's Toughest Curling, and World's Toughest Movie Reviews. Very happy to join you on the OCR Report. You will also be hearing in the future from other members of our OCR Report network of families, Heather Bodie from Overcome and Run, and Mike Stefano and Caitlin Ritter from Obstacle Running Adventures will join me as well. Today we're going to talk with Jack Bauer. Jack has become the recognized expert in OCR as far as statistics and race results and where everyone else stacks up to each other. Very excited to talk with Jack in our season preview of 2019 Spartan season. This weekend is the first race in 2019 for Spartan in the US. Before we start, you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Instagram at the OCR Report. You can follow the show on Twitter at the OCR Report. And you can be a part of the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. As I'm recording this, we have 1 review for the show. I would love to get 10 more reviews by next week. If you enjoy the show, do me 2 favors. 1, tell your friends. 2, subscribe. And 3, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It will help us immensely. So what's the show about? How is it different than every other OCR podcast out there? I've said before, there is no room for anyone else to start an OCR podcast if it's just another OCR podcast. But there will always be room for an excellent podcast. And that is what we will aspire to, what we do aspire to. We're going to talk about race results. We're going to talk about who won. We're going to talk about who lost and what it means for this week's race. This is the first week of the season. And Jack and I are going to talk about this weekend's race, but also the US Series, and even all the way down to September, the World Championship in Tahoe, and who do we think is going to win. And yeah, it's crazy. We're talking in January, right? September is a long way away, but it's fun to do. And who knows? Maybe we're right. After we talk with Jack, I will jump in again at the end and say goodbye to you. But I want to thank you for joining us on episode 1. Shoot me an email, willhicks@gmail.com, with any thoughts, comments, and criticisms. I would love to hear them. I wouldn't love to hear criticism, but I want to make the show as good as it can. So I would appreciate the feedback. If you're like, hey, this thing was great, or hey, this part was terrible, let me know. I would love to hear that. Shoot me an email, willhicks@gmail.com. It's time to talk with Jack Bauer. Let's go to the phones. Jack Bauer, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Will. I'm looking forward to talking some numbers with you.
This weekend is the first race of the year here in Socal. What do you think about the Socal race for the men?
For the men, it was actually a very well-attended race last year in terms of some of the top names. The podium consisted of VJ, Glenn, and Ryan Kent last year, and Mark Batres didn't even make the podium, and that was the season opener. So I think a lot of people are going to use this as an opportunity to kind of shake off the cobwebs and just see how their winter training is and put it to the test.
A lot of these guys have not raced since the World Championship last year in Tahoe. How do you think that offseason will affect them?
I think at this point, most people kind of realize it's a very long season. The US Championship Series is starting in February, and the championship is basically the last week of September. So I don't think too many people are really worried about what they're doing this first week. They just kind of want to get into that mindset for how to race and just get that competition blood flowing again.
A lot of guys talk about that when they're going into a race. They're like, oh, I'm going to take this as an easy race. But then once they get on the course, kind of that someone passes them and they're like, oh, no, it's on now.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's a competitive sport. If you're talking about the elite people, doesn't matter. Like most of them, they'll race a 5-year-old who challenges them to a race on the sidewalk. It doesn't matter. Once you see your former competitors out there, they're going to treat this as if it was an end of the season race, just out of pride and just to see where they stack up against some of the other names.
So there's a super and a sprint this weekend. Who are some of the men we should look for on top of the podium?
Well, being that it's in California again, I think the best bet is probably most of those same people that we just mentioned before. VJ lives pretty close by. Glenn does as well. Ryan Kent posted on Instagram that he's going to be there, and same as Mark Batres. Mark, I think that he's going to win it, even though he wasn't on the podium last year. We did the Spartan Combine, and that guy's just a beast. And I think that he's really going to make a big breakthrough. He's kind of just been in that 1B group. He's got the talent to be with the top 4 or 5 big names, but it takes one of them a little bit to screw up for him to sneak in there. But I think that this year he's finally going to sneak up into that super, super elite group. So I'm going to go with him for the win. I think that VJ will get second and Ryan Kent will get third.
Last year, Ryan Woods was kind of in that same category. He was always right there at the top, but not quite the top. He had quite the breakthrough last year. The US Championship Series kicks off. We talked about it in February. What do you think about the US Championship Series this year?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Ryan Woods, he won the whole thing in their point series last year. And I don't know if you've taken a look at how the new series is going to be with the 300 points for first place and then the arbitrary 264 for second and 240 for third. It's a really, I'm not a huge fan of it, honestly, and obviously that I crunch the numbers, but I don't think that it's the best type of series. I did a comparison just to see how things would have changed had the old point series been implemented last year.
Let's talk about that. So last year and every year before, you got 300 points for first place, 299 points for second place, 298 for third place, and so on down, right? This year, they've changed the point system completely. You get 300 points for first place. What happens after first place?
So as you mentioned, it's not one place you end up getting 1 point fewer. This year, it's 300, 264, 240, 216, and then fifth place is 192. So you have about 24 points different for a few of those places. But sixth place is 191, and seventh is 190. Anywhere after fifth place, if you're not in fifth place, you only lose 1 point. And so basically, if you're not top 5, you're not really going to make too much headroom in the series. And I think that's an extremely flawed difference. Let's take a look at, I know this is for the men, but just think about what happened when that burpee off at Tahoe a couple of years ago with Faye and Lindsay. You have them separated by less than a second, and this would be 24-point swing if that was how they scored it back then for the difference between second and third. But if they had that same exact burpee battle between fifth and sixth, they'd only lose 1 place or 1 point for that 1 place differential. So I think it's kind of flawed at this point. And if you want to talk about how things would have shaken up last year if they used the same system, I broke the numbers down.
Yeah, let's do it. You prepared a spreadsheet showing how everyone finished the top 5 last year, and if the same point system they're using this year in 2019 was applied to their results in 2018, how the finishes would be different. What would be some differences?
Okay, so big difference this year. It's not required, but if you want to do well and you're at the front of the pack, you pretty much have to show up to every single race because you'll get a 0 this year. There's no run 4 or run 5 and your worst one gets dropped, or only run 4 and then all 4 of them count. That doesn't exist anymore. You have to show up to all of them or you're going to get a 0 points for that race.
And all 5 races count towards your point total.
Exactly. Yep. So in theory, somebody who's mid-pack could do better than someone like Ryan Atkins, who, if he only showed up to 4 races and someone consistently gets in like the 190s or so, or 180s for their points, they could do better just by simply showing up. So anyway, I ran the numbers. Ryan Atkins, he didn't run San Jose last year, so he would have got a 0 for that. That would have dropped him from 2nd place in the US Point Series last year to 6th. And that would have been a $3,400 swing for him. Never mind what sponsors and other people would have matched, given how he placed. So that would have been a huge difference. Ryan Wood still would have won, and Robert Killian, Ryan Kent, and Angel, they would have all moved up. And Mark Batres would have moved from 5th to 7th, or 7th to 5th. Passing Ryan Atkins in the process. So it would have made a huge difference, even though Ryan Atkins was just so dominant most of the year. It was basically him and Ryan Wood's top couple places almost every single race. He would have dropped all the way to 6th and only won $600 if the new system was used last year.
Why do you think Spartan would make this change?
I think that they want to convince people to go out there to show that you have to keep returning, and it's a good business decision. I mean, if you want to do well in the series, you have to pay money to attend all these races. So I think that a lot of it has to do with people returning and racing more often. But at the same time, I think that they're trying to award peak performances. Like if you win, you should get recognized a little bit more than the guy who gets 2nd, and that's worth more than what happens in 3rd. But I don't think that the increments that they used are that reasonable. I don't know. They've had some issues in the past with their point series, and that's up to debate. I think there are other ways that they can be improved. But I mean, the fact is they're still given a point series. Most of the top names who are in serious contention will show up to all of them. So I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. You obviously had that Ryan Atkins issue if the points were the way that they were last year, but he probably would have shown up to San Jose had that been the case.
I think Atkins was out of the country last year when that race happened, but
oh yeah, he was over in like near Everest or something, right?
Yeah. So what do you think the effect will be this year because of these points?
I think that a lot of people, if you look at how the men's field stacks up, there really are only about 5 true elite guys. Where I was mentioning Mark Batres is just behind, but I think he might break into this next group. It pretty much takes Ryan Woods, Ryan Atkins, Killian, Cody Moat, and back when Hobie and Hunter, they're in a league of their own. And it kind of takes one of them to screw up and someone else, even a Ryan Kent or an Angel, to really have an amazing day while one of those previously mentioned people screws up a little bit to sneak up into the podium. So I think that realistically, most of those top 3 spots, it's probably going to go to Woods, Atkins, and Killian, unless Cody Moat gets really involved in the series. That's just kind of how it's been the past few years. Those names have dominated the series. But I do think that it's going to be a pretty big battle for that 4th to about 7th or 8th position. Now that VJ is getting a year older, a year mature, Ian Hosick's made a bunch of improvement. Kirk DeWint's going to be back on the scene. So I think that it's going to be very tight battles. But since each of those spots is only worth 1 point, I don't know how that's going to affect like the morale of some of those people if they know they're not going to beat Atkins or Woods realistically. That's just what the numbers are showing. So I think that that mid-lower pack, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle when they see that they're not really gaining too much position. It's only 1 point, no matter if they lose a couple spots.
You think it's going to hurt that second tier of elite more than it's going to hurt Atkins, Woods, and Killian?
Yeah, even though in my example, Atkins lost a lot of money, that was simply because he didn't show up to a different race or to one of the races last year. And that was assuming the same system would be used. But yeah, I think that those guys in like the 6 to 10, like the second half of the top dozen or so racers, that's where it's really going to affect a lot of people. And you might see people after 2 or 3 races, they realize they're not going to place or they don't have a chance of winning. They might not just continue in the series because if they're only paying out to the top 10 places, all that extra travel money just to win $100, it might not be worth it in their eyes, and they might just save it for Tahoe or West Virginia instead.
Something with those three guys we talked about, Woods, Killian, and Atkins, they both run a lot of Spartan races, but also a lot of Tough Mudder races. And they need their bodies. I mean, yeah, they're great, but they need time to rest and recover between big races like Toughest Mudder and then the next Spartan US race. If they have to be at every single Spartan race, it might increase their risk for injury this year.
Yeah, and I think that out of everybody, Ryan Atkins does probably the best job at not racing too much. I think that he only showed up to the US Championship Series races in 2018, and that seems to be a strategy that Lindsay did as well. So I think that the two of them, they're probably going to stick only for the big A races because it's not worth their time or risking an injury unless there's a lot of money on the line. Robert Killian, everyone knows that he probably races more than any other top racer out there. And Ryan Woods did a handful of Savage races, and he tinkered with a lot of the longer ultra distance stuff with Tougher Mudder this past year. But I don't know, it's a long season, and it is kind of disappointing that they got rid of you can drop your worst race performance, where it'll really shake up the standings if you don't elect to go to every single race out there.
So we talked about those three names, Woods, Killian, Atkins. What do you think about the U.S. Championship Series this year? How is it going to shake out?
I think it's probably going to be the same thing. I have a feeling that Ryan Atkins is going to win it. I think Robert Killian, I saw a post that he was committing to Best Ranger. I don't know how that's going to interfere with his Spartan plans, but I'm going to assume that he's still in the pro team, so he'll be at every single race. And I just kind of have that feeling of he lives in Colorado Springs with me, and we've talked a few times, and I just have a feeling that he's a little bitter about not winning since he debuted in 2015. I think that he has a ton of drive this year. But Ryan Woods, he went on to another level last year, and he was just so dominant in all these races. But I think it's too early to pick the order, but I would go with Woods, Atkins, and Killian to be the top three again in the U.S. National Series.
What do you think about that next level, fourth, fifth, sixth? There are a couple guys. You mentioned Mark Batres.
Yeah, I would say Batres, Ryan Kent, and VJ. I think VJ is making some big improvements this year. I know it's been a while from me as well, but if you think when you were going from 18 to 19 or 19 to 20, like there's a big physical maturity increase, and he's a veteran racer. He's been doing this for a long time, even though he's so young. I just think that he's finally really developing in his own body, and he's going to be a force. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him sneak on a couple individual podiums, but I still think that the top three names that I mentioned, they're kind of in a class of their own. And Cody Moat, I would put him up there as well, but he just doesn't, due to his job teaching, I just don't think that he can sneak away as much to do the entire series this year.
You mentioned Cody Moat. The Spartan World Championship is in Tahoe again this year on September 29th. Cody's had a strong performance there multiple times. What do you think about the World Championship this fall?
So everyone knows it's a Tahoe. There's no surprise. It's probably going to be 12 to 16 miles. Anybody who realistically has a chance to win the race has done it before, probably multiple times. So there's a reason that Cody Moat, Albon, Ryan Atkins, Ryan Woods, Killian, they're always top five. They are the five best racers in the sport. And I think Albon, honestly, at this point is just on another level versus everybody. I was really surprised that Cody Moat didn't repeat this past year, but I did predict that Atkins and Albon would go 1-2. But I think that he will definitely be top five towards the end of the year, assuming he doesn't get injured or have I think it's a thyroid medical condition, act up again. And I think that, Killian and Ryan Woods are going to be the rest of the top five. It's so early to make a true prediction. We kind of have to see how the battles throughout the year go. But those five are on another level at this point.
Albon won last year. That was the first year he won the World Championship in Tahoe. Why do you think he finally broke through there?
Oh, he's just he's insane. I mean, everyone's like, oh, it's the first time that he's won since 2014. They forget that he has not lost at OCR Worlds in any short course or 15K format since it began in 2014 as well. And I think his worst finish at Tahoe was fourth, and he had a second, and he was the world champion in 2014 in Killington. Like, it shouldn't be a surprise that he won. And he just won the Skyrunning Ultra World Championship earlier that year. The guy's just an animal, so it didn't surprise me at all that he won, and I wouldn't expect anything except the same. Unless it's a 12-mile sandbag carry, I don't think that there's a way that Albon doesn't end up on the podium again, or most likely win.
And then Ryan Atkins, this is the only race. The Tahoe World Championship is the only big race Atkins has not won. He's finished second 3 or 4 times. Why can't Atkins win Tahoe?
How messed up of a question that we're blaming him for not being the world champion. There are so many. I think when Hobie won in 2016, he was on the final rig in the photo shot as Hobie crosses the line. Last year when Albon was crossing the line, Atkins was right on the rig with him as well. He ran like the most ridiculous downhill split in the second half that basically had ever been run in OCR. He was flying down that hill. And I just think that Albon is just that much better when it comes to the current race format that's out there. If it's 8 hours plus, there's not a single human in the world who is better than Ryan Atkins. And I think that Atkins does have the ability level to win Tahoe, the World Championship. He hasn't done it yet. He's been so close all these times. But if you were paying attention in the race interview after last year, when they were interviewing him, he said that was literally the best performance that he could have done that day, and it just was good enough for second place because Albon was just slightly ahead of him. So, I mean, he's arguably one of the fittest people on the entire planet if you look at all athletic abilities, mental toughness, everything. And I just think that the competition who's had a perfect day that day, they've also shown up when Atkins had a great day as well. And his best effort that day was only good enough for second.
We tend to overlook him, but Cody Moat is one of the only 2-time world champions. He tends to kind of just pop up at the end of the year each year. What do you think about if Cody's on his best day against Atkins and Albon?
So you got to realize Cody is a former national champion trail running. I did a breakdown right before Tahoe, and it was just kind of going over where everybody made their move and like the most important part of the course through the past during Tahoe over the past couple years. And Cody Moat had like there was like a 7-mile stretch where he ran it 7 minutes faster than anybody else in the entire field. And keep in mind, these aren't just regular people. He's holding off Albon and Atkins and Killian and everybody. So he was literally averaging 1 minute per mile faster on this 7-mile stretch than the rest of the best OCR racers in the world. He's such a phenomenal climber, and I don't think that anybody later in the race has the climbing ability of him. He just turned 40 though, and I think that you just lose a little bit of fitness every single year, and your body just doesn't hold up as well versus Atkins and Albon. They're right around the 30 mark, late 20s. So I think that age does play just a minor role in this point, but there's no denying that those are the top 5 guys out there. And they have been for several years, and I expect 2019 to be no different at the end of the year.
So we're talking in January. World Championship is in September, 9 months away. Anything could happen between now and then, right? If you had to pick one guy, and honestly, if you're wrong, no one's going to remember this. And if you're right, we'll pull the audio up in September. But if you had to pick one guy.
Fine. Yeah. No, honestly, I think that it's so early to know, but I think that Albon is the best obstacle racer on the planet right now. And in the current format, knowing that it's back at Tahoe, he just beat everybody handedly this past year. I think until he loses, Jon Albon is the man to beat.
Who are some new names to watch this year?
So I don't think that they're necessarily going to be in that top group that I mentioned, but if you notice this past year, Ryan Kempson, he'd been around on the scene for a while, and this is kind of his coming out party. Really made a big impact, had a really great run in the Stadium Series, and was also holding his own in West Virginia and some of the other bigger races. And I think that he's a guy with just tremendous potential. He was a college basketball player without like a true running background, very athletic overall guy. And I think that he's really going to kind of make a step into that next tier of the upper class. But there are a few other names that I think are really going to probably fight for a top 10 at Tahoe and, fight for top 5 at a lot of these US Series races, assuming they go. But this guy, Tyler Veerman, he's from Colorado. He was sitting in top 10 at right around the spear throw, and then he missed it this past year. And I think that he finished about 10th, or he finished about 12th. But he is just a phenomenal climber. I've raced him many times, living in Colorado as well. And he just has a great drive, and he's a pretty strong guy as well for his size. And he's just a tremendous. He ran in college. I think he was about a 4:14 miler. So he's got a great running ability, and I think that he's going to be a name to watch this year in a lot of the series. He got, I think, 7th in Utah last year, so that was a very strong performance leading into the World Championship against a really deep field. It's another guy. He's a triathlete. He only ran one race this last year, and he ran so ridiculously fast. I think it was a super, and he won by like 14 minutes. And it was against several other guys who've been on the podium before, like one of the best masters athletes out there, John Clark. So this guy, Chris Brown, he is, I believe he's a triathlete or a trail runner, like a very, very legit trail runner. Do you remember that guy, JP Donovan, a few years ago?
No.
Okay, he was at Breckenridge at the NBC race, and he just like at the start line, he just went sprinting up the hill, and everybody's screaming out at him, "Yeah, you're just a tool. You're trying to be on camera." Turns out he got 6th. He was beating Atkins at the barbed wire, which was like 50 feet from the finish line, but Atkins just finished it a little bit quicker than him. The guy was on like the U.S. national mountain running team, and he just came in. He's a phenomenal trail runner, and obviously was one of the best of the sport. And I think Chris Brown has a very, very similar background. Like I said, he only ran one race, but if he ends up showing up to more of these, he's going to be a name that a lot of people will be like, wow, who is that guy? Another guy, former college track runner, Vinny DeSalvo. He did really well in the Stadium Series, and a lot of times they called him up in the second heat just because they didn't know who he was, even though he was consistently placing in the 5 to 8 range in most of the races. And he had a couple of strong performances throughout the regular season as well. So Vinny DeSalvo is a name to watch. There's a guy, Derek York. He's from he lives in Texas. I know he's been training with Robert Killian. I'm not sure if he has a military commitment this year or not, but he's a phenomenal runner. And quick little side story on the guy, the Boston Marathon, like 5 years or so ago, he got it. Like, he's a very, very good road racer, and he got into the elite heat of the Boston Marathon. And he decided to, while they're recording it on TV, he was like, I'm just going to go out and try to lead the race for like as long as possible. And he was beating all the Kenyans intentionally for like the first 5K or so, and he was on TV, and all the announcers were like, who is this guy? There's no way that he can hang on. And then like 10 minutes later, he's still hanging on. So I think he's like a sub 15-minute 5K guy back in college. Very, very solid guy, and he's super strong for his size. If you look at some of his Instagram pics, he's definitely built for OCR. Last guy that I'll mention, this is a Tahoe prediction. He was actually leading Ryan Atkins and Ryan Woods at the spear throw, which was about 45, 50 minutes into the race. Not too many people with his last name, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Peter Malinar. He's from, I believe, the Czech Republic or Slovakia. He was in 4th or 5th position at the top of the hill. He has been a cross-country skier the past 3 Olympics, dating back all the way to 2010. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of another cross-country skier from the Czech Republic who's done pretty well in OCR, Zuzana. So the guy only ran one race this past year in the U.S., but he had a couple podiums over in Europe. It's not an Olympic year. They just happened in 2018, so I'm assuming that he's going to be a little more open to adding some races into his schedule. But based on his performance right there, if you're able to hold top 5 position for 50 minutes against those people before missing a spear and then burping a couple other obstacles, give that guy a year of OCR-specific training. Peter Malinar, I think that he is a name to watch at Tahoe this upcoming year, who you've never heard of.
Well, Jack, the season starts this weekend. Any last overall thoughts on 2019 Spartan Race?
It's going to be a good year. What are your thoughts?
I'm excited. I think the US Series is the best thing Spartan has going for it in comparison to the Tough Mudder. It's fun to watch each race, and it's fun to watch how the kind of standings change throughout the series. NBC kind of made them do that. NBC had these 5 races they were televising, just random races, and NBC said, can you make them cooler? Can you make it like a series? Can you do something sexy with it? Spartan came up with the US Series, kind of created it around the televised races. NBC's gone now, but they still have the US Series, and it's a great thing for the sport.
Oh yeah, no, and let me just add in one more statistic for you. Sorry to keep bogging you down on stats, but so anyway, I've got all the numbers on Yancey Camp that I've been crunching for a bunch of previous Spartan race data. Exactly what you mentioned, where NBC was the reason that there was a huge increase in the most difficult races of the year. The top 6 most difficult races of the year from 2016 and 17 were the 5 NBC races and the World Championship. Statistically, like, they blew out the 7th place one by about 4 or 5% harder. Last year, hardest race of the year statistically was Tahoe, no surprise. Then West Virginia, Utah, Seattle, San Jose, and then Big Bear. Not a surprise at all. But the next 2 most difficult races of the year were the Citi Field Stadium and Dallas Stadium. And that was ahead of any other race in the entire year, whether it was in the Mountain Series or regular season race. So a lot of attention gets put towards the US Series, but the Stadium Series, you're having a bunch of big names show up. Like, they send you off in heats of 15, and there are plenty of guys who have top 5 to 10 potential who are in the first 2 heats of the day. So you're getting some really good competition at those races. When
you say most difficult, Jack, are you talking about the course or the level of competition that day?
Yeah, let me clarify that. I guess I would put, so for a college football comparison, maybe like strength of schedule, where how difficult is it to place well, not what is the elevation change or how muddy was it. It's simply how strong is the competition relative to the average race, how many good people are there, stuff like that. So it's how difficult it is to place well.
So, like, there's some people that run Killington every year who are screaming at their phones right now. What are you talking about? That's not what we're talking about.
Exactly. No, I don't. And if we're looking at elevation change, that's an entirely different metric. But this is simply like, all right, you have Atkins, Killian, Woods, Moat, all those guys showing up. That's why it's difficult, as opposed to how much terrain, how does the terrain change?
Jack, you mentioned your work at Yancey Camp. Why don't you take a minute and plug that? What are you talking about?
Yeah, so past couple of years on the side, I've been gathering way too much Spartan race data, basically crunching every single result, gathering all the results. And then I just kind of wanted to see what was out there, because you don't really know what you'll find before you start crunching the numbers. So anyway, Yancey, Culp, and I, everyone knows Yancey, we've been just going back and forth on different projects on like how we can, bring a little bit more statistical legitimacy to OCR, because I feel like it's something that's been really missing from the sport for a while. Anyway, been crunching a bunch of numbers. I was hoping to have my end of 2018 season rankings up, and then a 2019 preseason rankings. But I broke my hand in December, which sucked, not just for being able to crunch numbers, but also for training. So for past month or so, it's been really difficult to type. I got my cast off about a week ago, and I've been able to get kind of right back in the swing of things at that point. But everything's about a month delayed. But I'd say by second week of February, our coder, we gave him a new layout and the entire website on yanceycamp.com/rankings, I believe. It's going to look entirely different. We're going to have a bunch of new metrics. So instead of everybody being graded on a 0 to 100 scale, which we're now going to show you like how your strength of schedule for the individual people. So like someone who might have had 15 podiums this year, if they were picking on easy races, they might actually be worse than someone who placed no better than 5th but only raced all the US Series. So we're going to show a lot more detail on like how your position has changed week to week. The visuals are going to be a lot better. So just give us a couple more weeks between me breaking my hand and our website coder having a couple of work commitments and vacations that we just haven't been able to stay on schedule as much as possible. But as soon as this weekend gets going, I'm going to have the 2019 numbers rolling.
And this isn't just for Atkins and Killian and Albon. This is for anyone who's run an elite heat ever.
It literally there are 70-something thousand unique names for men, and I think about 25,000 for women who have run an elite heat, like worldwide. This isn't just US. This is allowing you to compare, like, all right, I'm the 50th best in the US. I'm the 12th best in Australia. You can every single number is equivalent to itself. And you can kind of look back through the years how good, if there are 100 people ranked 90 or above now for 2018, but there were only 20 in 2013. If you're ranked a 90 right now, you have the ability level and the race performance statistically to have been about the 20th best back then. So you can kind of compare against eras, against different regions, against worldwide. So it's pretty cool to kind of see how that compares. And like I said, just a couple of unexpected setbacks, but I haven't stopped crunching these, and we'll have everything updated really soon.
Tell me that website one more time.
www.yanceycamp.com, and then there should be a banner at the top that says rankings. You'll also when you go into rankings, you'll see two things. One of what I was just talking about are the individual rankings. So that's where you're going to see the 0 to 100 rating. And by the way, I'm also adding age group this year. So every single race, if you want to see like how the best age group guy did relative to the best elite people, they're all going to be thrown into the same 0 to 100 rating. So look out for that this year. But you'll also see on there, we're updating it as well, where it's the top 10 in every single series. So you want to know who got top 10 at the Tuxedo 2014 NBC race? Go ahead. You'll be able to find it.
I was just wondering that, yeah.
Yeah, I can't go to bed without finding out that info. But yeah, we're going to be adding a ton of info like that. But not just for Spartan. We're going to be adding OCR Worlds, European Championship, Tough Mudder, World's Toughest Mudder, like everything in there. And I'm also currently working on career prize earnings. So it's going to be very, very interesting when you guys see who's made a bunch of money through the years. Just prize money. I don't know sponsorships and stuff, but I'll get more into that when the info comes out. But that's something to look forward to later this year.
Jack Bauer, any last thoughts?
It's way too early to make all these predictions, so don't hold me to it. But I think that it's pretty clear who the top 5 have been for the past couple of years. And until some new face comes or some guy makes a crazy improvement, I think that you got to go with those same names year after year.
Jack Bauer, thanks much.
All right, thanks, Will.
Special thanks to Jack Bauer for appearing in this episode. Well done, Jack. Thank you for listening to episode 1 of the OCR Report podcast. I am thrilled to have you along for the ride. Hey, this weekend, if you want to know who wins the race, follow us on social media. The OCR Report on Twitter and Instagram. Also follow Heather Bodie at Overcome and Run on social media, on Instagram, Twitter. Mainly Instagram, it's where she'll be posting videos. She will be on site at Spartan Socal, letting you know what's going on there. Be sure to subscribe to the show. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm not sure about the reviews this time. Should I read the reviews on the show like I used to do, like I did on World's Toughest Podcast? Let me know. willhicks@gmail.com. Last thing. Several people have asked me, what's up with World's Toughest Podcast? So you're doing this podcast now. Is World's Toughest Podcast leaving? Is it done? No. World's Toughest Podcast is the number 1 rated obstacle course racing podcast in the world. And I'm very proud of it. It is my baby. I put a lot of work into it. I've had amazing guests. And it is not going away. Don't worry. Tough Mudder season doesn't start till April. The first Toughest Mudder is until May. There will be new episodes of World's Toughest Podcast very soon. Been talking to some very exciting guests, people I've never had on the show before, that I am very excited to have on soon. Check out the OCRreport.com and let me know what you think of the show. willhicks@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Go spend time with someone you love.